Yes, we are live. Good evening, everyone. It is Lisa Alexander, and I'm the executive director here at Stand Up Survivor. Come on in and join us. I am so excited for this conversation. And before I introduce our guest, I'm going to give you guys a second to pop in and make sure that you share this with someone. So let me just make sure that I share it too. So give me 1 second before I introduce our guest. And I'm so excited for this bold conversation with a fellow survivor. So y'all jump on in here and we'll get started in just a second. Hey, hey, when you come in, let us know where you're tuning in from so I can say hey. And we'd love to have you as a guest on the Purple Table Talk. So make sure that you shoot us over a message. All right. And so my guest is Myra Cassidy. Hey, Myra, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you, Lisa?
Wonderful. Always wonderful, 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 wonderful. I'm so excited to have you join me tonight for this conversation. Hey, Katie. So I'm excited to chat with you today. So Myra actually attended one of our groups in 2022. Yes, in 2022. And just listening to her passion and her story. So when we put out the Purple Table Talk, she was like, me, I'm there. So I'm like super excited to have you. Hey from New Orleans. Hey, Cindy. Hey from Maryland. Hey from Iowa. Jump on in here. Let somebody know that we're talking about faith, specifically as a Jehovah's Witness, but also just as a survivor, which we both are. So, hey, Myra, thanks for joining me. So, y'all, just so you know, somebody needs to hear this conversation. Oftentimes, and I mean, I know Katie, she works with all types of different types of survivors from all walks of life. And so it's so important, even as clinicians, that we learn all the different facets that survivors experience. So you are a Jehovah's Witness and you experienced domestic violence in your marriage. Where did you meet your ex-husband?
Absolutely. So he is actually one of Jehovah's Witnesses too. And before I get too far in the here, let me just make sure I just say that this is just me talking about my own journey. I'm not like a official spokesman for Jehovah's Witnesses. This is just my journey that I've had. And it's not the journey that all victims of violence in the faith will experience, but these things definitely happen to me to a ridiculous level. And that's kind of what brings me here doing what I do as a motivational speaker today. So I want to make sure I say that. Now I'm speaking of my own originality, but the way we met, okay, and let's also make sure I'm clear about this. So I met my ex when I was 15 years old. And he also is one of Jehovah's Witnesses, raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and we should not have been secretly dating, right? That was definitely a no-no. Being raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, dating is something that you only do when you are older, looking to get married. So this is like you're out of high school, you're wanting to get married, now you date and you date a proper way. So we were sneaking, teen dating, sneaking around dating. And I ended up becoming immoral with him or having intercourse with him. And that led me on a journey to where I had what's called a committee case, several from the ages of 15 to 17. And eventually I was disfellowshipped at the age of 17.
Okay,
And I
hold
had
on.
my
I have
daughter.
questions. I'm sorry, I have questions. I'm not Jehovah's Witness, so this
I
is
know,
I'm
but you
learning
gotta
this.
go. I
Hold
go
on.
and go.
So you guys started becoming intimate, started sleeping together while between the ages of 15 and 17. And then you had to disclose this to the faith community. Is that right?
So what basically happened was my conscience would it should be disclosed. Let's put that out there. If you're sinning, it should be disclosed, right? But I'm honest. I'm a very honest person, and I told on myself. I was 15 years old. Even the very first time, that was not my intention. Of course, that was his intention, but that wasn't my intention to become immoral. I was really a misunderstood teenager, unfortunately. And I talk about in other platforms. I've spoken about my childhood trauma, which sadly has a sexual connection to it. So, I'm looking for someone to love me, someone to protect me, and just kind of got connected with this individual thinking, well, he goes to the hall, at least, and ended up in a situation where I was immoral. So my conscience got to me. In my book, this is in the first couple of pages of my book, Let Me Tell It. I talk about this. I called my oldest brother and, told him, hey, this is what happened. I'm 15 years old at this time. He told my dad, my dad stormed into my room and told me that I was nothing but a B and struck me in the face. And my mother told me that nobody else would want me. So that kind of did some damage, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I found myself in a situation with this boy that I continue to get in trouble. When I'm saying in trouble, I continue to be sexually active with him. Now, the thing about it was I was baptized and he wasn't. Now, he didn't get baptized shortly before we got married after having 2 kids out of wedlock.
So because you're baptized, that means you're accountable.
I was baptized. So yeah, I had to go through what's called a committee case, where you do sit down with 3 elders behind closed doors and basically you tell what you've done. There's counsel involved. The idea is to correct the wrongdoer. But the issue that I feel in my situation was that I just wasn't heard. And of course, back in those times, for safe simplicity purposes, I'm a 15-year-old girl trying to explain to 3 men, no, I don't feel beautiful. No, I don't feel like I love myself, and not being heard, because actually I was telling them what my problem was. They weren't understanding what that was and what that felt like to be in the situation that I was dealing with. So sometimes in my healing journey, I always say I'm still healing. That's still hard because it's like, no, I was never heard. I mean, even, being a child saying, well, this boy tried to rape me, that goes to the hall. No one's hearing me. There's things that happen that all kind of added up, So long story short, I kept on sneaking around with him. I knew that, penalty would come about eventually. And long story short, I was disfellowshipped at the age of 17.
But what does that mean? What is disfellowship?
Okay, good point. So disfellowshipping means basically that no one in the faith can talk to you. Not my parents, not my uncles, not my brothers, not my cousin. No one close to the hall can talk to you. You're disfellowshipped. You are no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And your name is announced in front of the congregation. So it would be like, Mira Cassidy is disfellowshipped. Now, remember, I just told you guys from 15 to 17, I've had these conversations with elders behind closed doors. So the way it went was private reproof, which meant, the first time, okay, we're going to give you some counsel, try to assist you. No one knows about it behind these doors. After that, it was public reproof, and now it's disfellowship. So public reproof means that they just simply get up during the meeting. It was in a midweek meeting to say, Mira Cassidy's on public reproof. They don't say what you did, but at the age of 16, people kind of figure it out. So I went through, Mira Cassidy's public reproof, Mira Cassidy's public reproof, Mira Cassidy's disfellowship. And I was 17 years old and pregnant at that time. What's sad is that
that's tough.
It was tough. It's tough, and it's something that I'm still processing through now. I've always accepted it for what it was. I was disfellowshipped 3 years, 5 months, and 1 day. No doubt I was wrong for the behavior. The behavior was wrong, and you have to have punishment for the behavior. But the sad part about it is not being heard or getting the help that I needed, and not being noticed that there was a big element of trauma, of childhood trauma that presented itself. And then the sad part was not realizing that I'm connecting myself at this early age with an abuser who's just 2 years older than me. And now that I understand gaslighting, I can look back in this journey of over 18 years and go, he was gaslighting me as teenagers.
Wow.
We were teenagers and he was gaslighting me still then. So that's kind of a little bit of how the journey kind of started. Now, when we got married, I had finally, left him alone. I was like, I'm done. I've been disfellowshipped all these years, and got myself together for a long enough time span to be allowed back into the congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses. So I'm reinstated at this point. The sad part about it is after those 3 years, 5 months, and 1 day, mind you, during the time of being disfellowshipped, I didn't know that I was a teen in a violent situation. I got a good idea that something was wrong when I was 19 years old and he kicked in my door and attacked me. And from there, that's when I was introduced to domestic women's counseling services, which was a journey that I went on, sadly, on and off for 10 years before I was able to finally break free. And even when I was married, going back and always being in a state of confusion. Okay, do I listen to Paul? Do I listen to DV people? There was always this juggling thing that I was trying to do. So what I will say is that when I got reinstated at the age of 21, I had my daughter, then I had my son, got reinstated. And the sad part about it is well-meaning family and friends, I had only been back about 6 months, started to encourage me to let my ex back in my life. And they would tell me things like, well, he's changed. Unfortunately, family members, he's changed. You're the only one who can't see that he's changed. And, I look back at these moments and going, why would they even say something like that when I spent 3 years, 5 months, and 1 day, and he didn't want to marry me then? As a matter of fact, he cheated on me. Like, we were engaged and married at one point. It was so heartbreaking because I needed that to get reinstated in my faith. Because clearly, if I can't stop being sexual with you, I'm going to continue to be disfellowship. So we were engaged, we married at one point, and I found out he cheated on me, and it was just all this mess. Why wasn't we were engaged at that point? So long story short, at the age of 21, I knew that this was not a good decision because I had been to domestic women's counseling services enough to know that this probably was not a good decision. But I just couldn't stand up to my family and well-meaning friends. Everyone was telling me that he had changed. I had family members yelling at me, parents, just get married. You don't have a right to children have a right to have a home with a mother and a father. And you don't have the right to take that away from your children. Wow. Now, one thing I will say, I missed it, Lisa. I'm sorry.
I said, wow, that was bold. But yeah, keep going.
Yeah, it was deep. It was deep. I mean, it was even things I was just like, what in the world? I mean, even my grandmother, I go visit my grandmother. She has a picture of him on her mantle. That's my grandson too. Remind you, I come from a family of witnesses. I am a 3rd generation witness. So my children are 4th generation witnesses. So everyone is one of Jehovah's Witnesses, right? In my family, to give a little bit of a background. And what I want to share with people is we're not like this weak spiritual family. No, I come from what would be considered a pretty strong spiritual family, right? My dad is an elder. My mother pioneered as a teenager. I had a brother who went to New York Bethel and served. I have a brother, that same brother is now in Bolivia. Let's see, I have an uncle who's an elder in Georgia, a cousin who's an elder in California. So, even on the other side, my ex, his mother is a pioneer, which means basically she spends 70 hours. Now that it's a little bit less now, but back then it was like 70 hours a month in the ministry. So now it's a whole lot lower of a requirement. But so we don't come from this like weak witness family. We both come from what will be considered very strong families. I mean, his sister is at the sign language hall, and that's another issue, is the fact that his sister is married to my cousin. So talk about a little bit too close for comfort. So it's very difficult. It's very difficult because then you hear things like, also around the time when I was 21, sadly, just do it for the family. Having a family member tell me that, just do it for the family. And the sad part about this, none of this, as I'm healing, right? I'm a student right now at Indiana Wesleyan University studying psychology. So I'm learning to break apart what is actually witness trauma versus family.
Okay, so I remember when you were in group, right? Myra would be like, okay, there's the spiritual abuse aspect, right? Which is really important, right? And then there is the family trauma. Then there's the relationship trauma. So there was all compounded, and Mira would be like, yo, I'm like, okay, so it's really important that you separate it so that you can acknowledge it, each separate one, for what it is, right? So you married him. So you guys got married, right? And there was continued to be ongoing abuse.
So this is the thing about it. Okay, so this thing about it, like, remember, we had not been dealing with each other for a period of time, right? We get married, but before we got married, I'm like, look, I've been through too much with you. You cheated on me. It's been abusive. You got to promise me that we're not going to do this no more. I can't do this no more. And of course, what did he say? I promise. He promised he's not going to put his hands on me anymore. 3 months after getting married, he took a Tupperware dish like full of food and threw it at my head, and it broke. And I had juice and grease all in my hair, and I screamed at him, "You promised me you wouldn't do this anymore." And he told me that I made him do it. And after that, it was on and popping. It was just on and popping. Everything from being strangled, everything from, I mean, from being picked up and thrown down, all kinds of things. And that went on for 2 years in our marriage before I just couldn't take it anymore. And I went to the elders and said, "Hey, I'm being abused," and told them I needed help, and was told to be pretty much a more submissive wife. And sadly, that journey of telling elders what had taken place was one that I went on for years. And everything from even being told by one sister, "Well, stop going to Black elders, go to a white elder because they would understand." Trying that, no, that didn't work either. We're talking about telling elders things like,
I have a question. So you went to the elders, and any favor you do, you may go tell a pastor, a preacher, any mom, someone. You went to the elders and you said, "I'm in an abusive relationship," and they told you, "Hey, you guys, how are you doing? When you pop in, let us know where you're tuning in from." So when you told them, and they told you to be a more submissive wife, right? Okay, got it.
The very first time I went.
Just wanted to
the
make
very
sure.
first time I went. It and the hurt, and this is where you start to see how the saying goes for, it's for a lot of religions. The little buzz people say, or buzz for women, is brothers looking out for brothers. Because sadly, the individuals, the first 2 elders I went to, one of those elders actually studied the Bible with me and my ex-husband. When we were married, we had just gotten married. They were studying the Bible with us, he and his wife. So he knew, because I had told him during the study that he was physically abusive, but it was downplayed and they didn't want to talk about it. So I'm thinking, I'm going to go to him now and tell him that the abuse is still going on so he can help me, because I did tell him that he was abusing me before. And he and this other elder told me to be more of a submissive wife. Some time went on. I went to him again. Nothing really happened. Time went on again. I chose 2 different elders to go to, and just kept kind of going through this cycle of different things that I was telling the elders about, not only the physical abuse, but also other things he was doing to me that were scripturally wrong. You know what I mean? There's a situation where I found out he embarrassed the mess out of me, put it on Facebook. I found out he went to go see some woman. And I'm like, okay, well, what's going on here? Because you ain't going to be cheating on me. Wait a minute now. And even in the faith of Jehovah's Witnesses, you have to have proof. You just can't say, "I think he committed adultery." You have to have proof.
Do you have to have proof? Do you have to have proof for abuse too?
It's his word against mine. It's his word against mine. But this is the thing about it. That is why at the very, very end, when I had just had enough, all these years, the very, very last straw, I actually recorded it. I recorded it, and it still wasn't enough. And that's why I use that videotape, the actual recording. I use it now in my workshops where I teach the dynamics of domestic violence, because I want people to understand there's a problem when, first of all, you have to go to this extent to videotape it. And then you videotape it, and the men that you show it to don't see domestic violence. You know what I mean? And just that is so hurtful. At that point, when I showed these 3 elders this videotape, I'm thinking, Holy Spirit, everything's going to be taken care of. Because the whole thing about it was, at the end of the day, I wasn't a woman trying to leave her marriage. I was actually wanting him to stop. Stop. Let's get it together. This needs to end. So when I showed the brothers the videotape, and I came back and asked the elder, I showed you guys a videotape. This is at the point where we were divorced. We weren't together, right? So long story short, this gets real complicated and technical. And try to make it simple.
Give it the simple version, because y'all, it's complicated.
Simple version. It's complicated. When you are divorced, you are still married. Okay, you're legally divorced, but you're scripturally married. So what I did at first was
scripturally married, legally divorced. Got it? Within this faith.
And there means that you can't.
Hold that pause.
I missed that part.
So okay, scripturally still married, but legally divorced. And that is similar to other faiths, by the way. But which means, keep going, which means what?
You're not free to move on and date anybody else. You're still married. But see, this is the thing about it. Being one of Jehovah's Witnesses, all right, before you can, what is taught in the, and this is in the God's Love book, which was copywritten in 2008. There's a newer book out now. But what it stated in this book, remind you, a worldwide book, is that a woman shouldn't leave or shouldn't separate or divorce. Really, literally it says separate unless it's extreme physical abuse. I'm paraphrasing. I need to look at it to see how it's actually worded. But the main point is this: extreme physical abuse. And I always had an issue with that. I always had an issue with that. Like, what is extreme physical abuse? Like, and I spent so much time trying to even understand what that meant. Like, extreme physical abuse. What?
Well, what does that even mean? What does that mean? That sounds like death to me, but hey, I digress.
Well, yeah, to me too. You know what I mean? Which is eventually when I ended up, years later writing a letter, I asked the question to New York Bethel, what is it? Because he thinks it means, he would tell me, you can't divorce me. I'm gonna put you in the hospital. I'm like, no, that's what extreme physical abuse meant to him. So what I will say about this is, but the recommendation is to separate. But this is the thing that irritates me too. I'm not an attorney or anything like that, but it's not like, I live in Indiana. The laws in Indiana are a lot different than the laws in other states. I believe in California, you can literally separate and live like two separate lives. Like, you don't have to worry about asking him for nothing. You could do all this different stuff, I believe. But in Indianapolis, Indiana, it was in my best interest to file for divorce and then pause it because I didn't know what was going to happen. If this man, let's just say, right, and let's just say Holy Spirit grabbed him in 5 years and he said, let's try this again. I'm a changed man. And he really, really, really was a changed man, even though abusers really, really rarely change, leaving that door open. So that was my best interest to protect my assets, my children, was to go ahead and file for the divorce, stop it, and then see what happened, right? Because of the laws and the way the laws played out. Because in Indiana, you could only stay separate for 1 year and then it goes back. It's like, no, it's like void. So that's not even, what I mean?
Yeah. But still, even if you did that, spiritually, you're still married, right? So I have
exactly.
Okay, so I want to go back for a little second because something is just like, it's just boiling my blood. I just don't get it. And again, y'all know I have a big mouth, but I'm going to talk about how, like, you went to the elders, and this is not specific to Jehovah's Witnesses. Please do not think that within all the other faiths, to the imams, to the Christians, to the pastors, to the Jews, that we do not, as survivors, go to these faith leaders with these issues and say, I am being hurt. I am being physically, verbally abused, sexually abused, financially abused. And they're like, be a better wife, submit more, be better in the bedroom, do these things so that we would be treated better. And so as I listen to you go to leader after leader, and you're still not given the support that you need, just really ticks me off to no end. But what it further tells me as an advocate is how much more work there still has to be done. Because what happens is you stay in these relationships knowing that you're being hurt, but you're being told because your faith is so important to you. So you stay and you're continuously being abused to the point of strangulation, right? And I think even worse so is that in the writings, they talk about extreme physical abuse as though it has to be extreme, like a little bit, you can handle a little bit. You can handle a lot. You can handle a whole lot, just not extreme, which is ludicrous. But anyway, I'm off my tangent about that. All right. So I know at one point you wrote to the New York Bethel, which is like the head people in the Jehovah's Witness.
Right. Like New York Bethel's where all the publications come from. Because in this journey, a lot of people want to know, did you ever write Bethel? I'm like, I wrote a 3-page letter to Bethel. But before I even wrote Bethel, I had literally went through like this thing trying to get my dad to even listen. That was a big thing too. Being the only girl out of all my grandmother's grandchildren, everybody's a witness. People just assumed that if I was really being abused, my daddy and my brothers, my cousins would do something. That was always a big hurdle. I'm like, and even when I was always being asked that, well, your dad's an elder. And I'm like, he's not an elder even at this hall. And what does that have to do with anything? I mean, I'm telling them he doesn't care. He doesn't care.
So them believing you would have validated your story to these elders. So is that what you're saying? Right.
You know what? For me, okay. But the whole point about it is that really that was just them not wanting to deal with it. Your daddy is an elder. That was really just simply them not wanting to deal with it. Because the whole thing about it is, if my daddy is an elder, so why would I need to come to you at all?
Right.
Why was this not just a family issue then? I
So
got brothers, right?
yeah,
Right,
you weren't being believed in your own circle, in your own home. You weren't being believed. So
right,
you
in
were
my
not
own family,
in your own family. That's really painful, and
in
that's
my
really
own
common.
family.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so
I
so
mean, and
after
even,
you wrote, sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
oh, you go ahead. You go ahead.
I was saying after you wrote to the hall, what happened? So people are like, you wrote to the highest people in the land, within our faith, and did anything happen at that point?
So at this point, I wrote what motivated me to write the letter to them was because we were, divorced, separated, however you want to explain it. Mind you, he lived like 5 minutes away from me, which was super irritating. The fact that he moved 5 minutes away from me and had me on video camera. So really, if you really wanted to do right and even come over and pray, you sure enough could have because you had me on video camera. You knew when I was home. Okay. But long story short, I
Yeah,
ended up writing.
okay. Go ahead, go ahead, go.
I know it's deep. It's deep, isn't it? I'm gonna repeat that really quickly
No,
because the whole thing
I
about
heard you. I'm just trying to figure out how he got you on video camera, but that's okay. That's a story for another day. Keep going. So keep.
it really is a story for another day, and that's me going off of my little irritation, right? Because it's like at the end of the day. But long story short, I wrote New York Bethel. Why? Because February of 2019 on JW Broadcasting, they had a video that said even pushing is inappropriate, and I got so upset because I said, now see, at this point we had not been together for a year, okay, and I'm like, see, that's what I'm talking about. If you're saying that, remind you, extreme physical abuse, that was copyrighted in like 2008. If you're saying that even pushing is not appropriate, then how did all of this stuff happen? How did all of this stuff go on? So I wrote a 3-page letter to New York Bethel explaining the fact this is a generational cycle within my family tree. This is how my mother, I put in that letter, this is how my mother's mother died, and she was a witness. Okay, my grandmother on the other side was a survivor of violence. My aunt, which is really, really sad how they encouraged me to marry this abuser in the first place when they had already lived this journey. Even my mom, so it's like I told them this is a generational problem within my family tree. I go on, I say, what is extreme and physical abuse? At this point, I have my book out. I'm a motivational speaker. I said, look, I even have a book out. I have shared my journey with the DV organizations in the city and state. I want to know what extreme physical abuse is. I want you to understand that I am being shamed. I want you to understand what it feels like. And I would like to share with you my journey because at this point, I have spoken to so many elders in the city. I need to talk to somebody else outside of Indianapolis, Indiana. Who else can I talk to other than these individuals?
Did they help you?
This is the thing okay, this is what happened. And this is why I want people to understand these men aren't trained and they're doing things as re-traumatizing you as is re-traumatizing and re-traumatizing and re-traumatizing. You can't keep on talking to elder after elder after elder. I'm getting up to 17 of them. It's traumatizing and traumatizing and traumatizing. So what happened was I got a letter that said, we're sorry that you are under extreme emotional distress. It did not answer the question as far as what extreme physical abuse is. What they did say, we were going to send this letter to the elders at his hall and your hall, and we'll get involved if we need to. And I was like, and what does that mean?
So basically,
And for
it didn't
me, it
sound
was
like they did much.
Yeah. That was it. It was super re-traumatizing because I'm telling you, I need to talk to someone outside of Indianapolis, Indiana, someone different than what I've been doing. I need to talk. I need to get this out. I have questions about this. I want to share my journey because what I went through is so ridiculous. Especially, I even put in the letter, I videotaped it. If anyone wants to go to my YouTube page, you can see it. Okay, I'm just saying. I use it not to try to get at my ex. No, it's for the purpose of teaching and using it in my workshop to show there's something wrong when you show this videotape to leaders and they don't see domestic violence. There's a problem here. So the letter, this is the part that was very re-traumatizing for me. Okay. The letter that I sent New York Bethel was sent to the hall that he was going to and the hall that I was going to. But I didn't get a chance to see the letter that they wrote along with it. And there's this thing about the whole confidentiality concept that was taking place that also for me is a traumatizing thing. I'm going to try to explain this. Okay. The rules for confidentiality. For example, we actually were at one hall, Hall A, when we first got married. Okay. We moved to Hall B, a letter of introduction is sent with you. And what breaks my heart is why wouldn't you at least say in the letter of introduction, hey, we just strongly recommend that this couple have a Bible study with the older mature couple because they're having some difficulties, because you have to send what's called a letter of introduction. Another thing that's really, really hard for me that I want to share about my journey, Hall A that we were at when I got married, so many of them knew what was going on, not just the elders. I'm talking about people in the congregation. Here's what I mean by that. There was a sister there, and she actually was a survivor of violence herself. Her husband ended up abusing her and her daughter, and that was her final straw. I've spoken to the youngest daughter, and we're close, and her youngest daughter is really, trying to be a support system for me. But that was like, their family was like my ex's, like they were like his sisters. We call them his sisters. The youngest one tells me this story about how she's 10 years old, and she sees her dad basically throw her sister, physically throw her. And that brother was a mentor to my ex at that hall growing up. So my thing about Kingdom Hall A was, you guys let this cycle repeat. You can't tell me you didn't see me coming to that Kingdom Hall looking half dead sometimes, wore out. You knew what was going on, especially when the whole Facebook thing happened, because my ex left it public. Like, he didn't close his page. So a whole lot of people knew that he had went to see this woman, and I didn't even know. I didn't even know he even had a Facebook page. So it was all this whispering going on.
So what would you tell the elders? When you talk about the elders after elders, you said you talked to 17 different elders. If you were to talk to elders today that are going to end up watching this video, what would you tell them that survivors of abuse need from them?
For them to act. For them to act. That's the name of my workshop. Listen to victims and act. But this is the thing. You can't act if you don't even know what domestic violence is yourself.
Right.
And look at yourself. And look at yourself, because a big part of the problem was, I'm going to say one more thing, Lisa, I'm so sorry.
You're good.
I learned that some of these individuals I was going to were abusers themselves. And here's a perfect example. I was so desperate to have an elder be a mediator between me and my dad. I wanted to know years ago, why is my dad not coming over here and getting on him for what he's doing to me? I told an elder, and I said, before I even share this with you, I need to know if you've ever hit your wife. He said, no, I never hit her. I never hit my wife. And I told him what my issue was. I need a mediator. And I found out later on that no, he didn't hit his wife. He just took the steering wheel off her car, didn't buy her medications. I'm like, that's abuse.
Yeah.
Well, I'm asking you.
Listen, statistically, that's one of the reasons why faith leaders do not speak up, because oftentimes they're caught in statistically. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. They're caught up in their own some type of sin or abuse or something that they're causing. So it's not surprising that they do not want to act, because oftentimes if they act, they're going to be caught in their own fault or sin, which is something that they don't want to do. So of course. Now, so you said something really interesting. You said you want them to act, but I think you followed that up with, they have to know how to act. If they're not educated on what domestic violence looks like, specifically within your faith community, because even listening to you, and I'm a Pentecostal Christian, so our walks are different, although challenges are similar. Faith leaders have to understand the dynamics within their organization and how you guys need it. You're divorced, but you're still married. You have Kingdom A, then you have Kingdom B. You have this elder, then you have that elder. Understanding at what point is an elder going to step up and actually do something about it. So I think one of the key things, and I know that you do it in your workshop, is training on what domestic violence looks like. And I feel like as an advocate, we talk about that so much, and it may sound redundant to us. But I bet you if we ask for how many Kingdom Halls have trainers that come in and talk about domestic violence, how many churches, how many mosques, the numbers would be so extremely slim, And so the fact is, education needs to happen to the faith leaders, because it is literally killing victims of domestic violence in their own homes. So I know you talked about teaching them to listen and to act, and learning what it looks like. So what are some things that you feel? Oh, and I also wanted to pinpoint, we're going to head out in like 5 minutes, but I wanted to say you currently are still a Jehovah's Witness. Like you say that you're
Yes,
not an apostate,
yes,
you are. And I think that's really important for those that watch the video to know that.
yes. Now, don't get me wrong. I did have a journey. I went inactive for 2 years because I have what's called basically, I have a trauma response to the Kingdom Hall. Sadly, the post-separation abuse was so bad that it caused my mind to break down. And the first thing you do, having PTSD, is what do? You freeze, fawn, or you flight. So I had a trauma response to the Kingdom Hall, and that caused me to be inactive. What I mean by that is this. I am one of Jehovah's Witnesses now and was inactive for 2 years. I just couldn't worship. I just couldn't. One night I woke up in the middle of the night and I just couldn't breathe. I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what was wrong. And my bookshelf was just irritating me. This is a bookshelf that had 3 rows, my Bible, all these magazines from years, all my witness books and all of that. And I couldn't breathe. And so I started yanking them out, yanking them out, yanking them out. And I'll just put them in the garage, in a box in the garage. The box is still in the garage. And then all of a sudden I could breathe. So I had a trauma response to the hall. But let me explain this. It's not easy for me going to the Kingdom Hall now. The things that have taken place in the past couple of years have been crazy. But what kind of woke me up was when my daughter told me one day, I don't want to be a witness anymore. And it kind of woke me up. Because what happened was I was having the children go worship with their dad and supporting them because I could no longer go. When I had that trauma response, my mind just kind of broke down. I felt like that's it. I'm not supposed to be a witness. That's what this means.
I mean, when you think about it, a lot of your trauma, not only did it happen in your marriage or in growing up, but it also happened through the Kingdom Hall. Like the lack of support is traumatic. So it makes complete sense that you would have that type of trauma response. But you do say, like, you want people to know I'm not like I'm not an apostate.
Right. I am not an apostate. That is so, because my ex was pumping that had the children believing I was apostate, telling them this is all part of the post-separation abuse. You don't have to listen to your mother. She doesn't even go to the Kingdom Hall. All these different things. I want people to hear what it sounds like. Here's a perfect example. Have my mother tell me what you went through was not abuse. What our brothers and sisters in Russia go through is abuse, because in Russia, being one of Jehovah's Witnesses is under ban and you go to jail for that. Mm-hmm. And then the next week, having my ex yell at me, I didn't abuse you. It ain't like what's going on in Russia. I didn't abuse you. All of these things. Mind you, I had PTSD. That happened in 2015 while I was still married, and he knew I had the PTSD, but yet he was still abusing. So all these things are continuing to add up and be microaggressions and causing my mind to break down and cause my mind to break further down. I mean, even things that would happen when I was at the Kingdom Hall worshiping alone. When somebody's trying to talk about you, you hear people say things like, be forgiven.
But you still chose to stay in the faith, which I feel like is really important for people to recognize, because I feel like even when they see the title of this or they'll watch it later, they'll think, oh, well, she's out of it. And no, you still chose to. That's still your faith. It's still very important.
I came back right out. But understand, it's a journey for me. I have a trauma response to the Kingdom Hall. I mean, and a lot of people have warned me. I've been warned by mental health professionals who tell me, you may not be able to push through this like you think you can, because I get triggered when I go to the hall. So I have to take breaks. I may be able to go one meeting and not go for a couple of weeks. But, that's my faith, and this is something where, what's the answer? I've had this conversation. What's the answer? We're supposed to all just say, forget it to organized religion. That's not the answer. Yeah. Our leaders need to listen and do better.
I think that's the key. I think that, no one can tell anyone what faith or religion that they should practice in. I think that the leaders in whatever faith and religion and or organizations and companies everywhere should be educated in it, so that when someone says something, that they can act appropriately across the board, period. Right. So, hey, hi, Stacey. I didn't even know that. I didn't know you grew up in the Kingdom Hall. Okay, awesome. So they do not like divorce. And I think that was one of the things. And even I've spoken to people in other faiths and like, yeah, we're legally divorced, but spiritually, we're not. And I think that leaves a lot of confusion, even having intimacy when it comes to intimacy with your ex-partner. If you're spiritually still married, they use that as a manipulation tool. But anyway, thank you so much. Yeah. I do. Thank you, Myra, for joining me. I appreciate it. And I know that you have a workshop that you do specifically that you created to work with the elders. And I really hope that I'm going to share. Let me share some of your information here. Your book is on Amazon.
Amazon. Yes.
Let Maya tell it. You also have
Let me
another
tell it.
book, Bruise.
Yes, that's part of anthology I'm in. Yep. All available on Amazon. Let me tell it. Bruise Not Broken. Visit my website, MiraCassidy.com. If you have any questions, email me at MiraCassidy.com. Even if you're a witness, you have a question, I'll keep it confidential. Okay. This is going to be between us. One thing I want to say is my workshop is for not necessarily for elders, because that's not really the way Jehovah's Witnesses work. I asked New York Bethel if I could share my journey. They said no, clearly. But this is for anybody. I don't care what religion you belong to. If you want me to come to your mosque, to your church, or whatever, I will share my journey. Now, I won't specifically worship with you, but I will share my journey, because I'm so serious about sharing my journey in my workshop with whoever can benefit from it. So it doesn't matter, community centers, whatever. The main thing is that the workshop is for people who belong to the faith-based community and others who want to learn about the dynamics of domestic violence. How do you help victims, survivors? And we have to have that tough conversation about if abusers can be helped.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you, Myra. I appreciate it. And I love what Iris says. It's so sad when religious spaces are not supportive of those who are being mistreated. It's almost like they're trying to pretend the abuse isn't happening. And it's a really, really true statement. They try to pretend, just because they pretend it isn't happening or don't address it from the yeah, she does have a book. I'm going to put it here. Just because they pretend it's not happening or don't acknowledge it or send the support, it doesn't make it go away. Just like they don't want to acknowledge fornication or idolatry, or even, you know, drug use or whatever, rape, sexual assault. All of it is happening and all of it matters. And just because we don't talk about it doesn't mean it's not happening. So thank you so much for being my guest. Here is her website. And if you would like to join me on the Purple Table Talk, just go ahead and click on the button that you will see at the bottom and you can join me. Thanks, Myra. You hang out with me. Don't go anywhere, okay? I'll see you guys later. See ya.
Oh, I forgot one more thing, Lisa. You got 2 minutes?
Yes, go.
2 minutes. I got to say thank you. Thank you to everyone who's been there for me, to support me, whether you are one of Jehovah's Witnesses or not, Quaker, Black Nazarite, Catholic. I've had so much support. And I just want to say thank you.
She definitely wanted to make sure she said it. She said she got so much help, so many different people along her journey. So, all right, we'll see y'all later. See ya.